May we move on then to you, Paul, for the finance report, including the NHS reset?
Indeed, Malcolm, thank you. So in my constant attempt to bring you value for money, I'm offering you 4 reports in one in this particular item. I start by summarising the final outcome of the planning process for 16-17 with regard to the commissioning sector. We go on to talk about financial performance and the forecast as at month 3. Hot off the presses, I would say, thanks to the accelerated reporting process that we've been able to introduce in 16-17. I've highlighted in the report the risks to that position in a year of significant challenge for the NHS as a whole and no less for the commissioning sector. And finally, I've just drawn to the board's attention the financial reset document which we published last week along with our report and accounts. So just briefly turning to each of those topics. You can see the key elements of the plan set out in the first section of the report. I just want to draw your attention to 4 key aspects of the plan. The first and possibly most important is that it is actually balanced, and I would say we are committed to living within the 106.5 billion of resource made available to us for the current year. Second thing, it is extremely tight. When provider deficit funding and pensions effect are stripped out, we've got 0.4% per head of population to cover all the rest of the pressures on our core commissioning budgets. Plus, of course, and this is an important plus, the headroom that we create through the efficiency programmes that we are running during the course of the year. Third point is we've carved out 1% of allocations as an investment reserve to fulfil 2 primary functions. The first is to act as a buffer for any overspends in either the commissioning or the provider sectors in what is, as I've said, a year of exceptional financial challenge. To the extent that such overspends arise, we will need to release the reserve to commissioners' bottom lines to offset the resulting deficits elsewhere in the system. But more positively, the second purpose of it is to the extent that our actions during the year prevent such overspends occurring, which of course is our expectation and commitment, we'll be able to release the 1% for commissioners to spend accelerating the strategies they're currently developing through the STPs that we've talked about a couple of times in the last couple of days. And as we discussed earlier, of course, in the context of the primary care thing. So it really is important that we do manage the risks of overspends occurring both on the commissioning side, which I'll come back to later on, and indeed the provider side, which we'll cover particularly under the reset. Finally, on the plan, I just need to point out that creating that 1% of investment reserve, which wasn't funded separately in the spending review, has necessitated significantly greater ambition by commissioners in the setting of their plans for efficiency savings in 16-17, which inevitably carries with it a higher level of risk than we've seen in recent years. And I think I commented on that when we had a more intensive discussion of the planning process at the last meeting. So that's the plan. The second section, from paragraph 7 onwards, then sets out the year-to-date and forecast positions for the commissioning sector. You'll see that both are slightly less than 0.1% of our resource, adverse to plan at this stage, for the reasons I've set out in the report. And in the forecast, most of this is technical in nature. We do have a number of CCGs, particularly in the Midlands and East, who've started the year behind plan, but we've only got 2 organisations, Croydon and Shropshire CCGs, who are currently saying that they can't recover those positions and deliver the plans that they've agreed with us. As you'd expect, the relevant regional teams are very much on the case, working through the implications and options with both of those CCGs. But standing back from all of that, of itself, I'd advise the board not to read too much into the forecast overspend of 82 million that results from all of that. As I've said, it's technical in nature, it's less than 0.1%, and perhaps equally important, it's less than the 114 million overspend we were forecasting last year at this point. So I think those are just important things to draw your attention to in relation to the projection of the financial position. Of greater concern, of course, is the level of net risk in the system. And in the comprehensive risk and mitigation submission we get from every CCG and direct commissioning team every month, this has been assessed, as I've set out in the report, as 453 million of risk, net of currently identified mitigations. The bulk of the risk comes from the level of additional stretch in the so-called QIP savings plans, which I mentioned earlier. And this is going to require real focus over the year. We're really going to need to watch how those QUIP plans are developing, and to link back to some of the points that Matthew made, we're going to have to watch the activity trends in particular as the year progresses. But I would stress that this is a risk assessment, it's not a forecast. And both we and the CCG community remain completely committed to delivering within our available resources, as we have done every year since the current commissioning system was formed in 2013. And in that respect, this morning's HSJ bulletin, which suggests that a significant underspend is unlikely, this is absolutely right for all the reasons I've stressed on previous occasions, but that balance is possible if we pull out all the stops, is rather closer to the mark than yesterday's rather more dire predictions in the same organ. Talking of which, by the way, pulling out all the stops, of course, is a good metaphor for a public sector body which has more organists in its senior leadership team than any other public body that I know, other than the Royal College of Organists. So there we go. Thank you for that personalisation of the HSJ report. Finally, I would just draw your attention then to the reset process that we have initiated in partnership with NHS Improvement to ensure that both the commissioning and the provider sectors have the best chances of success in this critical first year of the forward view period. Board members and indeed members of the public will doubtless have taken the time to read the document, absorb its implications, and of course we took time in the commissioning committee yesterday to discuss how we can best contribute as NHS England and as the commissioning system to the success of the programme of action, which I've summarised at paragraph 21. So I wasn't going to go into the detail now. I just want to draw out 4 key messages on the reset though. The first is, and this is really of paramount importance, we have got a shared plan between NHS England and NHS Improvement, a shared plan as it will become with the commissioning sector and the provider sector at large. Second point is, it is going to be extremely challenging to implement, but it's absolutely essential that every single part of the system delivers its share of the plan. Both we and NHS Improvement, with the support of other national partners including CQC and the Department of Health, are wholly committed to supporting local health economies to make it work, but also to intervening rapidly and robustly where that appears to be at risk. And then the actions that we take over the next few weeks, and I really mean the next few weeks, in particular the provider cost reset process led by NHS Improvement, are particularly crucial, both for stabilising the position this year and for setting us up for success as we set out to implement the strategic plans we're developing in STPs across the country. So it is a plan for success, but it's a plan that needs to bite quickly, resolutely, and comprehensively across the country if we're going to bring financial discipline to the system and deliver in the way I described and preserve our capacity to invest behind transformation rather than having to use that resource for covering deficits and other adverse variances. So that's the core message. If I may just slip in a 5th thing, which I forgot to advertise in the little preamble, there is one piece of procedural business that I need to bring to the board for approval in connection with the reset and the measures within it. You will have read about the STF, just to confuse you with another set of acronyms, but the Sustainability and Transformation Fund, which is covering both the funding for providers and the funding for transformation. But in particular, the provider element of the Sustainability and Transformation Fund, the 1.8 billion, which is contingent on them hitting agreed control totals and performance trajectories, linking back to Matthew's point. We will, of course, need, as the year goes by, to be allocating the 1.8 billion as earned by trusts to those organisations on a rolling basis across the year. The board has already agreed the allocation of the 1.8 billion in the allocation decisions we took back in December, and the rules of operation of the fund have been published by NHSI with our agreement in the last couple of weeks. So the task is largely mechanistic on our part. It's application of clear rules of engagement within a budget which we've already approved for disbursement. So to avoid unnecessary bureaucracy, it would be helpful for the individual allocations to organisations as earned to be delegated to the Chief Executive and myself, rather than requiring us every month or two to come back, or every quarter I should say to be more precise, to come back to the board and say, could you please approve this set of allocations within money that we've already earmarked for this purpose. So if you would, Malcolm, put to the board that particular resolution, it would be helpful and avoid delays and bothering both the investment committee and the board with business which is not really required. That's really all I needed to say. I'm happy to take any comments.
May I just take that last point first then, which is to invite the board to approve it, but on the basis of the rules having been observed, and there is no payment out to those who have failed to deliver on their part of the bargain. Are we content to approve that delegation to the Director of Finance and the Chief Executive for the allocation of STF monies? Okay. Let me then invite any questions to Paul on other parts of his report. No? Right, Paul, thank you very much. And thank you for the clarity.